Better Buildings for Humans is powered by Advanced Glazings, makers of the Solera line of products. Solera is the leading glass glazing made specifically for architectural daylighting and with extreme insulation performance. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Better Buildings for Humans. I'm your host, Joe Menchefski, and this is the show where we talk about the impact that the built environment has on our health, our wellness, our productivity, our general joy of being alive. And of course, we like to talk about sustainable aspects of design as well. Today, I have a special treat. I have Roger Wilkerson from Little Architects in Charlotte, North Carolina. Roger is the practice leader for the healthcare division of Little. Roger, welcome to the show. It's great to have you here.
Thanks, Joe. It's a great honor to be here. Appreciate the invitation.
Oh, it's all my pleasure. Let's start by getting our listeners to know you a little bit better. Tell us how you ended up in this role with Little. What was the journey that brought you here?
I'm actually not an architect, which surprises people, but I grew up in it. My father was a healthcare architect, and he went into private practice in the 60s. He designed the first all-private hospital in the Southeast in the late 60s, early 70s in the small town of Lancaster, South Carolina. And so, it's interesting where you get to see some progressive ideas come out. But I grew up with it, got a business degree, ended up working for a bank for a couple of years, and then ended up joining my father doing business development, business management, that sort of thing. Myself and a fellow named Keith Fleming took over when my father retired, and so we ran Wilkerson Architects. And then in 2013, we were acquired by Little Diversified Architectural Consulting, is the full name, which is why we go by Little. We were acquired by them in 2013 to start the healthcare practice. And so we've gone from 5 people to about 45 people in that 11 years. So it's been very exciting.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's some pretty consequential growth. But hey, as the population grows and ages somewhat, healthcare is a pretty consequential aspect of our lives now. So I can see why it was a good place to be. Let's dive right in and talk about some of the unique aspects of designing healthcare facilities. Can you pick a few things about designing these facilities that are truly unique and different than other buildings, Roger?
They're very complex. Unless you're doing the next nuclear reactor or space station, they're probably some of the most complex buildings that you can be involved with. So from that standpoint, from a code standpoint, a life safety standpoint, very involved and very complex. They also have the greatest impact. You look at it from an individual standpoint. You can have the best day of your life in a hospital, birth of a child. You will most likely have the worst day of your life in a hospital. And so the impact that the building has on that. The facilities operate, talking to hospitals themselves, they operate 24/7. It's like a battleship. You just can't shut it down. If you're going to go in and you're going to renovate an area or something, it's like, all right, we're cutting off the water. No, sorry, no, you're not. So the phasing of it, it's very complex from buildability aspects. We've talked about the impact that it has on the patient or on the loved ones, but also on the staff. So there's just a lot of different layers of complexity and lots of different layers of impactful that hospitals have. We've all been through COVID and the impact, and hospitals, all elective surgery and everything was just shut down. And the sickest of the sickest were going to the hospitals. And, there's that saying, the hospital is a place you really don't want to be because of everything that's going on there. And so we really saw the impact the hospital has. We saw the need of the hospital magnified during COVID. And look what it did for the staff. It really kicked the staff in the teeth. And so what are we doing as we're planning spaces for them to help them through their difficult, challenging days? So, there are just so many different layers of complexness that these facilities have that make it just challenging and a joy to work in.
Can you talk about some of the technical complexities of the design? Is it the HVAC? Is it the backup generators? Those sorts of things. What are some of the more consequential technical aspects of the design?
I think it's, life safety aspects. It is heavy driven by code. And so the life safety aspect of that, you've got patients that are incapacitated overnight, which is that impacts code of how you will deal with the patients in an emergency, whether it be how you divide up your smoke partitions and your fire partitions so that you're planning for those worst case situations that you hope never will happen. But when they do, the building is set up to respond accordingly for the safety of those patients. So yes, the mechanical systems are probably some of the most complex that you're going to see. Electrical systems have gotten more and more complex. The building envelope has also got complexities to it. Flow and function, just how the building is going to operate, is very technical. So you can point to just about anything, but yes, the HVAC systems is probably some of the highest complexity that you're going to see.
Do you want to bring lots of healthy, beautiful natural light in your building and still meet energy codes? Try Solera from Advanced Glazings. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. Yeah, I bet. All right, I want to go into a question about something that's very near and dear to my heart. I work in the world of daylighting. So, there's a lot of evidence pointing to a strong relationship between having natural light and views available and length of stay for patients in the hospital, which I'm sure, correlates to faster healing. Are your clients asking for your firm to create spaces, healing spaces that have natural light and views?
Most definitely.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about is evidence-based design. And there's
Right.
certifications out there, EDAC, evidence-based design accreditation and certification. I've got that. Several other of our folks on the team are EDAC certified. And so it is using data. This is not just, oh, I think this is a good idea. This is you using scientific data. And you spoke specifically about one of the most important ones of daylight. Daylight, it does shorten length of stay, which is what we all want. It also has an impact on lowering the need for pain meds, which is a very good thing. So natural light, having a view from your patient bed to outside. We've got a bed tower vertical expansion project in Fayetteville, North Carolina that is opening up right now. We were actually touring it last week, and we've got huge windows in there. Every patient in every room is going to have that view. The staff has got a substation right outside that room and to see the patient, but they're also able to see that. So we talk about the impact that we can have on the staff on their day-to-day work. But the evidence is there for daylight. The evidence is there for indirect lighting. The evidence is there for artwork and how that can have a positive impact on a healing environment.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. I just recently had a guest on to talk about neuroarchitecture, this sort of emerging world of neuroarchitecture, and art was I was really surprised that there was actual evidence,
Yep.
strong evidence connecting art. It sort of sounds like right up there with healing crystals and some of that sort of, you know, pseudoscience, but it's really evidence based. Like the art is improving our ability to heal.
Yes. We
Yeah.
had a team, Andrea Geis, Nicole Norris, and myself spoke last month at the Plaintree International Conference down in New Orleans, specifically about art and how it impacts in a behavioral health environment. So a niche environment, a very specific environment, and how art. And so we talked about the types of art that have a positive impact and maybe the type that doesn't, and then even just how you frame the art and hang the art from a safety standpoint. But there's a lot of data out there, and everybody's got a budget drive a lot, everything.
Right.
Art tends to be at the end of that. And so if we can do some things to help an owner, it may be with donors to encourage them to donate in a way so that we're getting more art into a project for the positive impact that it has on the patient and the staff. At Little, we've got a team that does branded graphics. They do a lot of the graphics work, and we will pull them in on projects. They will work integrated with us to see what we can get of maybe floor to ceiling, wall to wall, full size graphics. You can get into a lot of creative stuff, especially in a children's center, just nature of the patient. And there's some really exciting stuff that you can do that. But it can help with wayfinding for the patient, for the family, but also has that impact of a calming effect. And so whether it be graphics or art, basically the same thing. But when we think of art, we tend to think of something framed hanging on the wall. But we also look at opportunities to go with full-blown graphics. If we're not able to, and nature scenes, are we able to get the windows where we all want them in a waiting room or something like that? And it may be that we can go with some graphics of a nature scene that can have also a pleasing and calming effect in those areas.
That's amazing. That's really cool. You talked a little bit about the nursing station, and I want to learn a little bit more about that. I mean, if you go back, they used to design hospitals with the nursing station at the dead center, right? Like a hub and spoke sort
Mhm.
of style design, which sort of makes sense in terms of walking distance, but it completely isolates the nurses from the natural world. And, the positive impacts of natural light and views that are there for the patients. Well, they're there for the staff too. The staff need it as well. What's changed, given that realization that your staff also, you know, need to have those kinds of connections to the outside?
So what we're seeing with our projects now is really a hybrid of that. You still have a bit of a centralized station, and the staff wants to have interaction with themselves. So if you go to totally decentralized, they're out there and they feel like they're on their own. And so that's why I say a hybrid station. And so you'll have your patient room set up, and right outside of it, you'll have, I'm using my arms here, but you'll have a small desk with a chair, and they will have visual control over either one or two patient rooms, depending on how it is set up. And so they can sit there and they can watch a patient or two patients and see if the patient is in distress or something like that. But it gives them that touch with the patient and with the family. But then also having a centralized nurses station, it gives them their touch among coworkers, and they can interact and collaborate on the needs that are on the floor for that.
So that's been figured out. That's brilliant. Have you ever had conversations with nurses that came from a more traditional hospital versus working in a more modern design like that? Have you ever heard any feedback specifically from the staff about this modern approach?
That's where we come up with the hybrid is when we're designing a facility, we really need to involve the users, the staff, and we talk to department heads, but then we also are talking to various members of their staff. I had read a study actually for a neonatal intensive care unit design, and there's basically three different theories or ideas for a NICU design. One is just really, I hate to use the word ward, but an open room where you have a lot of bassinets and the staff are all intermingled in that. The other extreme of that is private rooms where each baby is in a private room and the staff are taken care of that way. The middle example is a pod scheme where you might have 3 to 4 bassinets in a room. As I'm reading this study, I'm thinking, well, the private room is by far the best. The patient is an infant, but the young parents are in there and the noises are lessened, which has an impact. There's evidence-based design on light and noises. But as then I'm getting through this study and reading it and the conversation from the nurses, they really feel isolated. They don't like that. And so then it's like, okay, well, really, that the hybrid one where you have 3 to 4 bassinets in a room, you're still limiting noise. Some of the parents can interact among themselves. I mean, think about that. You're a very young parent with an infant that is in a neonatal intensive care unit. Just think about the emotions that you are going through and to be able to connect with somebody, your caregiver, maybe it's another parent. And so getting that feedback, and this again came through a study, but getting that feedback was fascinating and it really changed my opinion of which would be the best layout for a neonatal intensive care unit. So it's very important to be able to be asking the people, the boots on the ground, the ones that are living there day in and day out, what their experience have been. And then, your example is if you've got somebody that came from a more traditional model, then we can walk them through the different options of, okay, we can look at this or this. We typically will do mock-ups early in design, and it can be done virtually. It can be done with cardboard in a warehouse at the hospital. It can be built out just depending on the time that's available, the space that's available, and that sort of thing. And then we can bring the staff in. We can bring beds in and be rolling them in, and we can take the pros and cons. We're writing on the wall. Give us your reaction. You got night shift, you got day shift. And so it's like, okay, night shift, go in there in the middle of the night and leave your notes up on the wall of what you think. And so you really want to get that feedback. So you do have people that have different work experiences, different backgrounds that they're bringing. They're learning, but they're also sharing with us, and we're learning. So that's a lot of the ways that you're going to interact with the staff to get their ideas, but then also share with them some ideas of how the solution may work.
Oh, what a brilliant approach. I love that. Tell me about noise. You mentioned it very briefly. I'll tell you, Roger, I just had an experience. I have a very close friend who had some heart issues recently. He ended up spending 3 or 4 nights in the hospital. When I went to see him on night 3 or whatever, he said, the worst thing about this has been trying to get some sleep. He's like, they're moving all the time overnight. They have to do their jobs, but I wake up every 15, 20 minutes just from the motion of the nurses moving around from room to room. Is there anything that can be done? Is there anything being done to provide a little more noise isolation, for lack of a better term? Giving them the patients an opportunity to get a good night's sleep by ensuring that you minimize noise to them.
Several years ago, we were working with a hospital and trying to find a way to have a better patient experience. And so we were studying a lot of different things. And we had an acoustical consultant come in as part of our team. And he did what you heard. He spent the night at the hospital and had a report on some recommendations. But the thing that got my attention, and logistically it makes sense, but the thing that got my attention, his suggestion was stop waxing the floors at 2 in the morning. And I had floors that need to be waxed.
Yeah.
There's no traffic at 2 in the morning. You have a housekeeping team that's there. So like I say, from just a pure logistics standpoint, what better time to do it?
Right.
But he's out there, he's buffing that thing, he's bumping into walls and everything. And so you got to step back and realize, okay, we have people that are working night shift. The rest of the world, we're asleep when we're trying to sleep. And so there are things like that we can look at. We've all had that experience where we've been in the hospital with a loved one and the coming and going and all. I think a lot of the teams look and see what is truly necessary. What do we need to be coming in there? And during the different levels of acuity that the patient is dealing with obviously impacts that. One of the things is looking at, can the patient control the door? The patient has the remote control for the TV, for the bed, to raise the bed, to lower the bed. And the more a patient can feel like they're in control, the better experience they're going to have. Well, can they shut the door? Can they adjust the blinds? The sun's coming around and now it's coming in. Well, do they really need to go bother a nurse to come in and just do an adjustment on the blinds or something? And so how much control that we can give a patient. So that can impact acoustics also, is being able to close a door, being able to adjust things like that. But it's all of this, all the senses come into play in a healthcare setting and really has an impact on the experience.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, so this next one is also very personal. This next question, I had an incident recently with my youngest daughter, and I had to spend a night in an ER with her. I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 months ago, and so I spent the night in an ER in the local hospital. The waiting rooms are horrible, like just horrible, and I think it's probably an older hospital thing, but they were just bland and without any sort of decoration. Sterile is maybe the best word to describe them. It was like being in isolation in a prison or something of that nature. How have we fixed that in modern design to make it, not such a horrible experience for the people who are waiting?
Get them out of the ED as fast as possible.
Okay.
So the emergency department, everything goes in the ED. Everything goes in the emergency department. And yeah, if you're there on a Friday or Saturday night, it's sometimes referred to as the gun and knife club because of all that shows up. We need that. We want that available. I heard somebody speak years ago and they said that, all society's mistakes show up at the emergency department. And you look at all the addiction, all the abuse, all the violence, all of that shows up. And then you and your daughter are walking in, or a man and his wife who's about to give birth are walking in. And so everything is coming in to the emergency room, and they are equipped to handle it. They are some of the most amazing people, very high energy folks who are working in the emergency
Right.
department. So, first and foremost is safety. And so, safety for the staff, safety for everybody there. There's usually a security office very close to the emergency department. So, these are the challenges that you're dealing with. Now, the waiting rooms are awful. They get worked over. And so, you need furnishings that can withstand pretty much everything that I've described. People are getting sick. There's fluids, everything you don't want to say out loud is happening there.
Right.
And so it really is the goal, as we've studied emergency departments, of flow through. Get them out of the waiting room, get them into exam room. And maybe there's a fast track. So if it's a very serious injury, you're going through the regular emergency department. If it's somewhat minor, you're going through the fast track, and they get you in and out. The phrase they use all the time is treat them and street them. And so get them in and get them out. They don't want people waiting in the waiting room. You don't want to be waiting in the waiting
No,
room.
sure.
The availability of inpatient beds impacts the flow through of emergency department. How fast they can get x-rays back, imaging department, and how fast they can get that information back. Lab, how fast they can get information back from drawn blood. All of that impacts the stay of emergency department. So studying an emergency department is fascinating, because you don't just study the emergency department. You're looking at all of these different elements of imaging, of radiology. You're looking at labs. You're looking at beds. You'll hear them talking about they got an observation unit. Well, that's to get them out of the emergency department, out of the exam room of the emergency department, but they're not quite going to a bed. So an observation bed technically is just under 24 hours stay. A bed is supposed to be in a bed if you're going to be 24 hours or more. So lots of thought, lots of planning goes in of how to move people through emergency department. They are just getting busier and busier. And so what you experienced is not uncommon, of showing up. The waiting room is in tough condition because of the nature of what's going on there. Hospitals work very hard to prevent that, like I say, with the type of furnishings and with the maintenance that they do there. But of the hospital, the emergency department takes a beating most of anything. So it's really fascinating to work with emergency department and looking at how to solve their issues.
Manage the connection between building occupants and the outside world using Solera translucent glass. Learn more at advancedglazings.com. It is fascinating, and stepping back and looking from above a little bit, it's also fascinating that an architectural firm gets that deep into operations. You have to do a really deep dive into operations in order to get this right. Is that common in every industry, or is it especially? I assume it's especially significant in hospitals.
My career's been healthcare. And so, we see it
Right.
at Little, we've got different practices. We got a community practice that works in education, K through 12, and university, and they certainly deal with that. Everybody's looking at planning. It is just very complex and multi-layered with healthcare. We're doing some master plans right now where we're working with hospital. We're planning out really 10 years. And it's interesting. There's a couple of campuses where we're working on right now where each of them have a building. One's a building, one's a parking deck that's in the wrong spot and put there several years ago. And now it's blocking growth. They did not plan how their campus was going to grow and look out far enough. Land is a limited resource. And 20 years ago, they had a lot of land. Well, they keep growing and keep growing. And so you've got limited land. You really need to be thinking several steps ahead. And we were presenting with a hospital board one time a project that was for a new women's center. And we made a comment about the growth of surgery and had a board member say, well, I'm sorry, this project that you're working on has nothing to do with surgery. And I said, yeah, we're nothing, but you're going to need to grow it at some point in the future, and we're not going to block it in. And so a project that was not in our contract, if you will, we were still looking at how that growth could happen with the project that we were working on. So you have to always be looking several steps ahead, several years ahead, 10 years, even 15 years ahead of how this campus is going to grow.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, I want to change, away from sort of operational, tangible things and talk about some perhaps intangibles. Like we're going to talk about beauty. Are there reasons to create hospitals and healthcare centers that are aesthetically beautiful? That the buildings themselves are aesthetically beautiful. In other words, like, does beauty play a role in healing?
Absolutely. Beauty plays a role in everything. Look at your family, look at your loved ones, look at what makes you pause during the day. I did a whole lot of traveling in September and October and out for morning jogs. I ended up having a phone of the sun coming up over the Manhattan Bridge, East River. I got a picture of the sun coming up over the Mississippi River from New Orleans. I got a picture of the sun coming up over Lake Michigan from Chicago and one in Charleston Harbor. And it's because each time that beauty made me pause, makes people pause. Everybody's stopping, taking pictures. So what does that mean? What is the impact that it has on us, whether it be emotional or spiritual or what have you? But beauty has such an impact. It lowers our blood pressure. It's calming. And so that's obviously a very big picture, but you look at the impact that a building can have. Now, I will tell you, I mentioned my father was a was a hospital architect. He used to say this, and I couldn't believe he would say it in presentations. We're trying to win work. He goes, "It used to be you want to figure out which one was the hospital. It was the ugliest building in town." He was right. It was very institutional.
Mhm.
Most of these hospitals came out of the Hill-Burton Act. The Hill-Burton Act was a post-World War II stimulus package from the federal government. So most of these hospitals got started around that time, very institutional. It was all about healing. You talked earlier about length of stay. Well, my gosh, you go spend a week in a hospital, that's no big deal. And so with everything that we've learned, with all the evidence-based design of how to shorten that length of stay, of how, as we talked about, things like natural light and art can impact a healing environment. Beauty, whether it be the inside of the building, the outside of the building, the beauty of nature that you see from the inside of the building, certainly has that impact. It also improves community trust. And so a lot of times we will see a hospital saying, look, I'm really trying to improve the opinion that the community has on us. I want a facility that's going to look like it's technologically advanced, that they're going to get the best care. And so that's a part of that beauty. It's a part of that aesthetic. It's a part of that message that this building is having an impact on the community. It's building the confidence. It also can impact the donors. And so it's like, okay, you're talking with some of the leaders of that community and you're looking for a donation to help with a building or with a program at the hospital. A more pleasing building is going to have that impact. Somebody's name may be going up on that building. Well, okay, that reflects on them as individuals. So there's different layers of how beauty can impact. But, I kind of go back to that thing of just you're walking through your day, you're driving through your day, and something makes you pause and you look at something and it's like, wow, that's pretty sweet. And you might not even think that, consciously, but the aesthetic, the beauty of a building, the beauty of a space on the inside can be so refreshing and so calming that it's really an impact that we're looking for.
Yeah, it makes being alive worth it. The
Hmm.
beauty can help make being alive worth it for sure. I want to come back to something you were just speaking of a moment ago. You were talking about sort of the long-term planning you have to think about,
Yep.
growth and those sorts of things. What about adaptive reuse? You mentioned how incredibly complex hospitals can be. Do you also plan for someday this is not going to be a hospital, someday this is going to be something else? Does that come into your thinking at all?
You do look at flexibility. So, first of all, okay, you're doing an addition for cancer. Well, it'd be great if one day we didn't need cancer centers. And so, how would that building be reused? And probably reused by the hospital. So you're looking for adaptability. I talked about the Hill-Burton Act. A lot of these hospitals still got a core to them that was built in the 50s. Oh my goodness, and so there's adaptive reuse. There are times when the best thing you can do is take it down and start over because then it's going to last for another 40 or 50 or 60 years. But adaptive reuse is really critical in looking at. The other thing is healing. Hospitals right now are really based on fixing us when we're broken. And hospitals, they want it to be preventative care. And so, I made the comment about, well, wouldn't it be great if we didn't need cancer centers one day? We get a cure for cancer, and so it's the need for it either diminishes or goes away. That'd be beautiful. What we do need is to figure out preventative care. How do we educate ourselves? How do we educate communities? How do we educate young folks? The importance of eating right, of exercise, and then you got the whole genetics as science improves. What can we deal with, attack before it's a problem based on the knowledge that we have of genetics of individuals? So they're different as we see healthcare looking way in the future and how it can change. I mentioned we got a group here that does community work. They could end up be doing a lot of the hospital work if preventative care is more educational. And so those are the shifts that we start seeing greater increase in preventative care, then we're really going to see some nice changes. Most of my career, our clients have been hospitals, or developers that are doing medical office buildings or something like that. In the past 10 years, we started working with a client, and it has to be listed as a confidential client, but it's a Fortune 100 company, and it's an insurance company, and we're designing the clinics for them. I never thought I'd be designing clinics for help. 20 years ago, I didn't think I'd be designing, but they are definitely motivated for preventative care. That's their business, is to keep us healthy. It's very noble business, but it's also financially driven for us to have healthier communities. So even, kind of shifting what we're talking about here, but the ownership of healthcare is shifting to include insurance companies now. And so there's different players that are now in the healing market. And I think that we're going to see some really good changes that come along with that.
Yet another example of where market forces are truly
Hmm.
driving a greater good for society. That's a wonderful answer. Let's talk a little bit about maybe one or two great projects, even just one, Roger. Can you point to, say, one project, a project Little did, or something else that, name the hospital and say, this is an amazing job because?
I'll be honest, there are several that come to mind. And so the first thing that I want to speak to, I want to brag on our team because it was not a project, it was a design competition. Ron Boozer, who's our design principal here in the Charlotte office, found this design competition, and we took it on. And he purposely got with our younger staff, younger designers, and it was for a children's hospice. And you talk about the most fragile of the fragile. You talk about the biggest impact that you're going to have. I mean, it's hard for me to talk about this without getting choked up. But they took on and picked a site. So we did not have a client on this. This was something that we were doing on our own to really stretch ourselves. And he led that team into a beautiful, called the Butterfly House solution for children. Now, there's only 3 children's hospitals in the United States. There's quite a few in Europe, but we've got experience with hospice that's adult driven. But again, just, think about that and the impact and the need that is there. It ended up winning an award with the competition. It ended up winning an award with Healthcare Design Magazine. And then this year we got notified by Fast Company for their Groundbreaking Ideas Award that it won there. And so an amazing project, an amazing outcome, amazing creativity, an amazing need. And what the team there was so special. And to be able to get recognition from Fast Company magazine was a high point for a lot of us. So that, not a project. We got a VA project in Veterans, it's outpatient center in Fredericksburg, Virginia, that is opening up now. It's about 500,000 square feet. And again, we talk all the time internally about what we do impacts lives. And every day, every project impacts lives, but every day that we come to work, we are impacting lives, whether it be communities, physicians, staff, patients, loved ones. And you think about the Veterans Association administration, and I've been around for quite a few years, and they really struggle with their reputation. And in the past several years, they've been addressing it and really put a lot of emphasis on creating much better experiences for our veterans. And so the outpatient facility that we did in Fredericksburg is beautiful. We've got beautiful healing gardens. So you talk about aesthetics earlier. It's not just bricks and mortar. It is also how do we bring in the outside? How do we bring folks to the outside and move around? Staff can go in that garden to relax. Patients can go sit. Loved ones, they're dropping off the patient and their spouse or whatnot. They can go in that garden and have that. So that's a project that I'm very proud of. We've done some great things with children's. I got a soft spot for kids. I mean, if we're not taking good care of our kids in any manner, healthcare, education, or anything like that, if we're not taking care of our kids, we're missing out. And so we've done some wonderful work with children's in Charlotte with Atrium Health. So there's quite a few projects. I think what I'm most proud of is our team. I mentioned Ron. I got Georgia Cameron, who's our healthcare lead in Charlotte. I've got Leslie Robidoux, who's our healthcare lead in Newport Beach, California. Helena Chung, who leads healthcare for us in Orlando. Sean Murphy leads healthcare in Durham, and just their focus on impacting lives, the way they lead their teams, and their emphasis on working with our clients to make sure that, we're exceeding their goals on projects. So very proud of our projects, really more proud of our people. So,
Oh, fantastic. All right. Time for the $1,000,000 question, Roger. So
mm,
every episode I ask the same question, and I tell people just answer it from whatever perspective that you'd like. What makes a great building?
it serves well. It serves beyond the basic needs. I think if you look at what makes a great person, it's somebody that's loving and caring, and you see that through they serve others. Mother Teresa, a Christ-like service, however you look at that. And so how does a building serve? A developer's has got his financial goals in there. Well, it needs to serve that very well. Other owners, hospitals, they are serving their community. They're serving their staff. They're serving their physicians. We've talked about all the different layers of service there. And so I really think that it's a building that serves beyond the original goals that they were looking for.
Oh, great answer. Beautiful answer. Roger, before we go, is there anything that you'd like to announce? Anything you'd like to promote? Any big news that you'd like to share?
I mentioned the Fast Company thing. That was really a high point of this year. And again, I come from a small little Wilkerson Architects to now working with Little and a much larger firm and exposure. And to see our team really stretch themselves and do something that gets that type of attention was amazing. So I think, we're doing a lot of master planning, which we find really exciting, and it really stretches us and helps us stretch our clients. So, I would encourage any hospital, please do your master planning. Please do your master planning. Think it out. Bring in a consultant that'll challenge you, and bring in a consultant that'll also learn from you. Every hospital's got a strategic plan, and the master plan, the master facility plan, is how the facilities will need to be modified, if they need to be modified, to accomplish the strategic goals. It might be about market share. It may be we need to go get this market share in this area. Okay, are we looking at a medical office building, an ambulatory surgery center? Are we looking at a freestanding emergency department? What are the options? But my whole point is it needs to be thought out. And the master plan needs to be directly related to the strategic plan. So it's something we're involved with a lot, and it's something that when I'm working with a hospital, when we're working with a hospital and they're talking about planning, we know they're being very thoughtful, not just for themselves and for today, but so that the folks that come behind them, the next leaders of the hospital, the next board members of the hospital, the next physicians, the next staff, will find that those leaders were very faithful to the vision, and we're looking at beyond today on that. So something we just really like to encourage and get excited when we see.
Really important advice. Roger, thank you so much for your time today and your insights. I really appreciate it.
Joe, it's been great. I really appreciate you reaching out. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been wonderful talking to you. Take care.
All right, you too. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Better Buildings for Humans. For more information on the world's best light diffusing and highly insulating glass glazing, please visit advancedglazings.com.